conversation. So to get us started, maybe I'll ask for Dr. Patty Tamara Leonard to give an official land acknowledgement to get us started in a good way.
Hi. So this is good. Is everybody who's in charge of saying that they can hear me online? Somebody? We're good. Everybody's good. Okay.
Sounds
okay.
good.
I am delighted to welcome you to the University of Ottawa. Bienvenue à l'université d'Ottawa. Nous sommes une université bilingue, ce qui veut dire que tout le monde peut parler dans la langue de leur choix, as long as you're allowed to speak in whichever language you'd like, as long as one of them is English or French. So, you know, bilingual, but in a particular way. I'm Patty Leonard, and I will just start with a land acknowledgement. We pay respect to the Algonquin people, who are the traditional guardians of this land. Nous reconnaissons le lien sacré de longue date, l'unisson à ce territoire qui demeure non cédé. We pay respect to all the Indigenous people in this region from all nations across Canada who call Ottawa home. Nous reconnaissons les gardiennes et gardiens des savoirs traditionnels de tout âge, and we honor their courageous leaders, past, present, and future.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Willard Metzger, and I'm the executive director at Citizens for Public Justice, who is partly hosting this event and very delighted to be a part of this the book launch. Citizens for Public Justice is, or CPJ, as we are known, is a national progressive organization of members who are inspired by faith to act for social and environmental justice in Canadian public policy. CPJ and its members have been advocating for public justice in Canada for over 60 years. And in the mid-1990s, CPJ incorporated refugee and migrant rights as a core policy area, and we've been engaged in it ever since. So this book, A Renewed Canadian Welcome, is a book published by McGill Queen's University Press and born of CPJ's work that reimagines Canada's immigration policies through the lens of lived experience. So what would a Canadian immigration system that is rooted in human rights and lived experience look like? That's really the question that the different authors and different aspects of immigration, refugee migrant rights address, and it's a very good read. The book is also dedicated to Stephen Kaduli, who was CPJ's first permanent refugee rights policy analyst, who died suddenly in 2021 during the COVID crisis. And so this really is a labor of love. This has been in the making for a good 3 years. It's the book has gone through a couple peer reviews, making this an award-winning book right at the beginning, as soon as it was launched, May 27th. So we're very delighted this evening to have two of the authors of one of the chapters here with us this evening. So we'll just get right into it. Dr. Patty Tamara Leonard and Shabnam Salehi wrote a chapter together in the Renewed Canadian Welcome that looks at Canada's response to Afghan refugees by comparing it to the response of other countries, as well as Canada's response to other crises. Every country has an obligation to provide protection to refugees, but sometimes there is an even greater responsibility that a country may have towards a particular group of refugees based on their involvement in the circumstances leading to forced migration. So maybe the first, to get the conversation started, Shabnam, can you tell us a bit about why Canada has a particular responsibility to Afghan refugees? And why is it important to consider Canada's involvement in various conflicts globally to establish a greater responsibility towards some group of refugees?
Hello and good evening. Thank you so much to everyone for coming here, and special thank to Professor Leonard for making me as a part of this project. It was a good experience, and it was my first academic work here in Canada. So it has somehow built my path toward academia. So it's very special for me. And plus, it's also very special because it is my personal story and also my lived experience. So coming to your question, when coming to the refugees, we know that when we speaking about the Afghan refugee or other conflict zones, or when we are speaking about the Canadian response rate, I think we should think it in two different ways. One, we have a global refugee mechanism or responsibility. That is something that's under the Geneva Conventions, that every country has to somehow pay their part. But the second thing that in Afghan case and Canadian case, that's very specific, that's the second part. The second part is that since in Afghan conflict, post-2021, or we can call it on a war on terror, Canada was not a outsider or observer. Canada was a part of the international forces that they intervened in Afghanistan. And Canada sent the troops there. So, Canada was involved in development. Canada was involved in governance. Canada was involved with the civil society, and they was involved in the war. On the other side, Afghan was also involved by helping Canadian back home in Afghanistan. They were interpreters, they were civil society workers, they were on a different sector that was working with the Canada. So when it comes to the Canada, I think beside the global responsibility that every country has under the Refugee Convention, Canada has another moral and political responsibility. And I think we shouldn't be considered as only the kind of humanitarian generosity. It should be considered under the political and also the moral responsibility, because Canada was involved. And the main reason for the refugees conflict, international intervention, and also the international political kind of intervention in the country. So when a country is somehow involved in creating chaos, or not, if you can speak it on the other way, creating the risk for the people of the country, when they withdraw, I think there is a responsibility we should pay attention for that. In that case, I think Canada and all other countries that were involved in the 2 decades of war and conflict in Afghanistan, they have a greater responsibility. And besides that, since Canada is somehow called a homeland for the refugees or immigrants, that's the other kind of extra burden that somehow you're putting on the Canada, since they are champion of human rights, they are champion of it is a country of immigrants. So that's, in my point of view, that's why I think that Canada is, there is a more on Canada than the other country. And everyone is looking to Canada in a view that it should have a more responsibility in the other countries.
All right, very good point. So Canada is a country of immigrants, a lot of newcomers to Indigenous land. Yeah, very, very true. And as you said, Canada's involvement in the war creates an added responsibility towards refugees coming from Afghan. Okay. In addition to Canada's unique responsibility that you've highlighted, your analysis in the shared chapter also explains some of the factors to be considered when comparing Canada's response to one group of refugees versus another group of refugees. For example, some refugee advocates have made comparisons between the approach Canada took towards Afghan refugees compared to Ukrainian refugees, and felt that it was an example of blatant discrimination. However, there are numerous factors that need to be considered to make a fair comparison between the two responses. So, Dr. Leonard, what are some of the key factors that need to be considered when making comparisons between varying responses that Canada has towards different groups of refugees?
How long do you want me to take to answer that question?
The floor is yours.
Oh no, I have to make my own judgment. Okay. So Shabnam started by thanking me, but I'm gonna throw it right back. So look, I'm a philosopher. In 2010, my school asked me to do a similar thing. They wanted me to give a talk where I was going to talk about the philosophy of refugees. And I was going to do it with somebody who some of you will know, Mike Malloy, who has worked in refugee resettlement for his entire life. Okay, and they were like, okay, so you're going to talk to our students, whatever, like students. You're going to talk to them and tell them interesting things. And I'm a team player, so I was like, sure. Like they've asked me to do it. It's my boss. Okay, so I was like, sure. And then I went home and complained to my partner. It's like the most boring question ever, right? Because look, for a philosopher, the answer is easy, right? The answer is that the country is divided, the world is divided into states, and the condition of having states is like what states do. Like there's borders. So if you have borders, states with borders, then all states become responsible for refugees. Obviously, right? There's a clear logic, and from a philosophical perspective, the problem is solved. So I was like, this is a boring question. How am I going to talk for 45 minutes? And okay, so as you know, but I did not in 2010, this is a very difficult question because actually the entire world is not filled with people who see the blatant logic of this, which is that a condition of having borders which you control is that when people are inside of borders where they're being oppressed, they have to be able to exit. And if you can't exit, if you can't enter, okay. So not everybody found this obvious. Okay, so that is to say that since then, I have looked to people with migratory experience, and in this case, migratory expertise, to sort of try to give me insight into why the question is more complicated. I mean, it's not actually more complicated. It's just why don't people agree with me? Is a thing I often say to my children. I'm obviously correct. So what's the mistake that people are making here? Okay, so that's the introduction. So Shabnam credited me for writing the piece, but actually it's really, really important that I have a very clear moral view, which through her instruction about the Afghan experience, I was able to see where other people also need persuading. Let's say that. Okay, so thank you for that. That's how I would start. Okay. So when it said Zoom is being recorded. Okay, so like recorders, like Michael. I'm gonna say something, but if you take the clip and put it online, I'm gonna say it was out of context and you're the bad guy. Okay. So so specifically with respect to Ukrainians, I actually I was aware of this, right? People were saying, Ukrainians are white guys, they're kind of Christian-y, so they're like going to blend right into Canada, whereas Afghans, they look a little different, they have a different religion, they speak a different language, their level of development is different. Ukrainians are so educated, they had a whole story, okay? And so it was, and the sort of I want to say the left line on this was that this was obviously racism. I just wasn't as sure about that because when Afghans came to Canada in smaller numbers, they came as refugees, permanent residents to Canada with the full and complete set of rights that Canadians have. And that's, for better or for worse, expensive per person. The government gives a number to each refugee. Depending on what mechanism, it ranges between $20,000 and $45,000 a person to get them settled into the country, right? Because they need, it's not like somebody coming off an airplane from a war zone has a place to live or, that has food. They need all of these things. They often need medical care. They often need languages, right? And so as a philosopher, but also as a person, you can see that whatever our duty is to a refugee, it cannot be just to let them in. It has to be to let them in and create the conditions under which they can start a life here. Right? That has to be what it is. And that is expensive because people don't come with languages. They don't come with skills. They don't know how to do a job interview in Canada. There's all kinds of weird stuff about job interviews. Like, where do you look? Do you look at the boss? Do you look at the person? There's all kinds of stuff you need to learn. right? Anybody who's moved to the UK from Canada and stood on the wrong side when you're trying to get into the movie theater knows what happens if you don't know what the norms are in a particular country. You have to learn them. Okay, so Afghans were admitted in smaller numbers, but with a bigger package. And Ukrainians were admitted. Now it's become more complicated, but when the Ukrainians were admitted, they were given $3,000. They had to pay their own flight here. And with $3,000, they were told to go and you can stay a year and then you have to go home. So overall, I wasn't as persuaded as the sort of the standard left view that Afghans were poorly treated. There was more of them should have been admitted and more of them should have had their rights respected. But it is important that when we admit people, we admit them with the resources they need in order to settle into a life that makes sense in Canada. And if we can't do that, then we would be doing an injustice to Afghans. Okay, so maybe I'll stop there and say, with respect to that comparison, I thought that the comparison was not apples to apples.
Very good, thank you. That's very helpful and good. A good insight and historical background. Very, very, very important. We're just going to make a bit of a shift here of microphones so everybody can hear better online. All right. So as we talk about refugee protection, your chapter together also discusses how some groups of refugees face additional layers of vulnerability. So Shabnam, can you give some examples of these layers that can affect people seeking safety and how we as Canadians can advocate for sufficient access to refugee protection for these groups?
Professor Leonard mentioned some layers of the vulnerability. I think the Afghan case is somehow a good example of that. For example, if we compare Afghans with the Ukrainians, that in this case, we will somehow understand the layers of the vulnerability that Afghan people face. And that's why I'm always, when I'm speaking about the refugee system, I'm asking for the intersectional approach that somehow cover each and every category. For example, if you feel you are a woman, you are from Afghanistan, and you are a human rights advocate, you will face that three layer of the race code discrimination based on your gender, based on your profession, and based on your nationality. So that's the situation. For example, nowadays in Afghanistan, women are not allowed to work, women are not allowed to go to school, women are not allowed to participate in the public life. And plus, if they have a kind of background working with the Western forces, or they were advocate for the democracy and also for the human rights, that's the extra layer of the discrimination or risk that they are in it. And plus, if you are Afghan, since I'm just comparing to Ukraine, that to better understand the situation. When the Ukraine crisis happened, Ukraine, the door of all countries that somehow surrendering Ukraine, that was open toward the Ukrainians. They can go very easily to Poland. That was easy for them to go to any country. But for Afghanistan, it was like a landlocked country. Unfortunately, we don't have any good neighbors. None of the country were providing us the visas. So Pakistan somehow stopped the visas. At that time, India stopped, Iran stopped. And if Iran hasn't stopped, Canadian, they don't have an embassy there. So they were somehow locked inside Afghanistan. In this situation, most of the countries, including Canada, they ask the refugee to go to the third country and then apply for the refugee system. If you are not getting the visa for the third country, or the third country don't recognize your regime, and you are not providing document, how we can go there? And that we have 100 of cases that Canada somehow, student visas or other visas that Canada somehow provide the visa, but they were not allowed, or they were not able to leave Afghanistan to go to the third country to do the medical test or to do the interview. That's the extra area. Or for example, I can give you the other example of the extra layer of the vulnerability that Afghan people are facing. We have almost 3 million refugees in India and Pakistan, and they don't have a document. They are not allowed to have a documentation. They are not allowed to go to any school or something. When you are living in the uncertainty, how you can claim a refugee, and they are waiting for the UNHCR for a decade, but still there is no luck. And beside that, sometimes I say the refugee issue is not only the humanitarian issue, that's not only moral issue, it's mainly political issue. And sometimes it is somehow going beyond the political issue. In some countries, it's politicalized. For example, if you are seeing in the community level, for example, if you are Afghan, since your skin color is different, you follow the different religions, the community level, we face somehow we experience lack support comparing to the Ukrainians. But since the Ukrainians share the same color or maybe same values or something, that was the other extra layer of the risk that we were facing. For example, nowadays, the Afghan refugee topic is very politicalized in all the world. For example, one Afghan refugee committed a crime, and you see all the visa were somehow suspended for Afghans, and then they are not going to allow to issue the visas for Afghans from last year, and the same with the European countries. So that is the situation that externally are giving you the extra burden. For example, the gender, the sexual orientation, the nationality, the race, that is everything that I think that's somehow extra layer of the burden. And plus, since most of Avant, the English is not their first language, not a third, not a fourth. For most of them, it's fifth language that they are speaking. The language, the culture shock, and everything that's coming, that's giving them the hard time. I'm not sure how much time do I have. I am coming to the second part of your question. That's what can we do? I think if we thinking, yeah.
Access in Canada. Is that right?
Yeah. That's extra layers that both inside and outside Afghanistan, since the past is something that somehow made our today. So that somehow continue to the new society. So that's why I give the example of from inside Afghanistan and also from the host societies, host communities.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not working. It's not working. So important in the book is lived experience, and we'll get into that a little later too. But you're acknowledging or pointing out that the requirement to go to a third country before gaining access, that's a huge barrier for many different peoples. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Carry on. Thank you.
To the second part of the question, that what can we do as a community? I think we can do a lot. So first time when I came to Canada, I was in a hotel in Mississauga, and a guy, he was Veterinarian, he came to our hotel and just came and just knock and asked me when you came and what we have been doing there, and just thank me to coming to the Canada. So that's the smallest gesture, but it somehow okay. Can you hear me? So I'm just sharing my experience, because when I came, it was the end of the 2021, and it was the quick period. And we were in somehow isolation. No one was allowed to come to us. And I was in a hotel room, and I don't know what the future is bringing to me. But the only small gesture that somehow helped me, and I feel that I'm home and feel welcomed. So that's the small. I think by doing this kind of gesture, we can help. Beside that, since Canada luckily has some good measure, for example, the community-based the sponsorship. Beside a lot of community are doing the integration and the sponsorship job, and also in the integration job, and also a lot of communities somehow involve directly one-to-one in mentorship job. And beside that, a lot of communities somehow they can help to I'm lack of word. How can I frame it? But maybe to change the mindset toward the different category of the refugees or immigrants. For example, if they see me as someone who is different than them, I think if there is a community-based work, I think that's somehow changeable toward me. If community can work on awareness raising, and beside that, a lot of other things that somehow give the host community a kind of sense of that people are different and they should be treated different, and plus a lot of other kind of maybe culture programs, or somehow that work with the refugee to somehow not introduce, somehow help them to know their culture. I think that's the community base we can do.
It's a good reminder that just the simple act of befriending, of saying hello, of saying welcome, and getting to know newcomers is a huge benefit and a huge gift, and that's something that is easy for people to do. You don't have to look at programs or policies. Everybody can be a friend, and that's a critical step. Thank you for reminding us of that. A unique aspect of the book, A Renewed Canadian Welcome, is bringing together academic researchers and activists in the same volume. And Dr. Leonard, you testified to that in just this chapter as well. So often books and conversations will be focused on one or the other. But this book tries to bridge this gap and reimagine human rights-based policies informed by lived experience, by learning from migrants with lived experience and academic researchers who also have lived experience or are deeply connected with migrant communities. And that's something that I think McGill University really, that's why they were so attracted to this volume. So Shabnam, you're both a scholar and an activist. So can you describe how these two roles inform and support each other, and why this bridge between academia and the grassroots is so important?
I think it's a very good question. That's not the first time that I'm responding to that, because my work as a human rights defender, and plus I was in academia and I'm in academia, that's something that create this question, and every time I face this one. Well, one time I have a good friend, and she always tell that we activists do the dirty job, and academics take the credit only by doing research or writing something. But I think that is not the case. Both of them are equally important. Both the activism or the activism, and also the academic. So in this case, when we were writing as a co-author, since I do have a lived experience of immigrants or refugee. I'm not a refugee, but maybe someone who's made to flee their country or coming to the new society. And also I was somehow had an experience of academia. So I think when we are asking the questions like, for example, fear response to each category of refugees. For example, if you are asking about, we have a question of the layer of the discrimination or risk that different category are facing, or for example, if you are asking about the different programs, that is somehow that's connected to the lived experience of the refugees. But at the same time, what academia is giving us, that's the tool to evaluate the different aspects of the programs. If you are taking the numbers, for example, we are taking that the Canada brought the 40,000 Afghans back home. And if you don't have academic tools to somehow evaluate this process, or somehow we compare, I think even for the simple comparison, we need academic standard to be fair. For example, if we are claiming that this Canadian approach toward the Ukrainian was it was super, but toward Afghan was not good enough, I think that's not a fair comparison, as you mentioned. But if you are looking for the fair comparison, I think that's something that that the academic can give us. How we can have a both side of the issue, and how we can compare them, how we can evaluate, how we can write the policy suggestion, how we can do that. But for lived experience or activism can give us how we can follow this suggestion that academia made, and how we can do that advocacy, and how we can reach that. So I think both of them, they are two sides of the same coin, and it's somehow equipped as sometimes, if I'm thinking, for example, if I was only academic person and I don't work in any organization, or I don't have any live experience, I will be looking on the issue like a somehow obstacle perspective or lens, or the abstract kind of the issue, maybe the abstract point of view. But now, since I do activism beside that, I do advocacy beside that, that somehow give me the real life, the realities of life, and it somehow make it very rich. And when I'm speaking on the academic, or we are making the suggestion, people find them real, not somehow abstract kind of thing.
Important discipline that, as you say, gives the tools, the rigor, the system to be able to do some good analysis. But without the lived experience, as you say, it could become very unrealistic, the kind of solutions or policy changes that the tools might take you to say, well, this should work, but the lived experience would say, well, actually, it doesn't, right? So we need to modify or change or make something that will actually work. Yeah, very good, very good. Patty, you similarly work for refugee rights, not only as a scholar, but also as an individual and community-based level, particularly through your involvement in a group called Rainbow Haven here in Ottawa. So can you tell us more about this as an example of how we as members of civil society can tangibly work towards a more just Canadian welcome at a micro level for individuals and communities, even when the macro level policy changes can be slow and, dare we say, discouraging?
Yes. That's actually a really hard question. It's funny that you're saying it with a smile. I co-run an organization in Ottawa, which is called Rainbow Haven. We welcome, advocate for, settle, fundraise for LGBTQ refugees and asylum seekers here in Ottawa. We've been going for about 10 years, and we welcome people one person at a time. So we aim to be the person who shows up at Shabnam's hotel room and says, thank you for choosing Canada, which is a line that I think is extremely important. I mean, I'm actually delighted to hear that it was meaningful to you, because that's the first thing that we say when we welcome people. We've welcomed 26 people to Ottawa, and number 27, with any luck, is coming in October. So your question's a hard one, so I have to answer a different one. So I'll answer this one. Right around the same time when I thought the question about refugees was boring, right? So I am like an actually a case study in exactly what Shabnam has just described, right? The refugee problem for me was solved because it's obvious what everybody's duty is. Everybody signed the Geneva Convention, so that's that. You have to let refugees in. That's the condition of being a legitimate state. Um, so right around that same time, I've been writing about. It's like of no interest to you, or maybe it is. I don't know what's of interest to you. Anyway, I'm very into open borders. Actually, I don't think that borders should be open, but I think that if you're not going to have borders that are open, you need to have justificatory reasons for why not. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in the philosophy of this, come talk to me after. But that's the short version. And so then some of you, have you done this? You go and you have children, and children are very confronting. First of all, I mean, for all kinds of reasons, but one of the reasons is then you start to think, or maybe just me, I don't know, but like you start to think, what is your kid going to say about you when they're like describing you to their friends? So. My oldest one is now 14. I asked her last night, would you describe me as having no life? And she was like, she'd recently described another adult as having no life. And I was like, no, mommy, you have a life. You have a life. It's like, okay. Was actually not persuasive. But anyway, okay. So I started to worry about what they would say, right? And specifically my older kid, who was alive at the time, what she would say about me. And so I thought she would say actually things that I didn't want her to say, which is that she says, oh, it's so obvious everybody should help refugees, but what the hecko is she doing about refugees? Nothing. She's sitting in an office, actually a brown chair, pontificating and not actually making a difference in the world. And that was that's the short and also the long version of the origin of Rainbow Haven, which I have always called my non-hypocrisy project, right? So that when my kid says, my mama believes that borders should be more open than they are, and there has to be an and there, then she says, and she's doing something about it. She's trying to make those borders open for a particular cluster of individuals that we have personal connection to. So that's part one in answer to your question. And part two is, I mean, I'm from a refugee family. My parents are refugees from communist Hungary. Tells you how old they are and how old I am. But nevertheless, an extremely shaping experience. And my dad talks about having landed in England from Hungary and the cup of tea and that the soldiers gave him and all of this, right? So the tangible sort of signals of welcome are actually very small. And I think that's the message here, right? The message of Rainbow Haven. I mean, we're a group of 35 people. When we welcome one person at a time, and given the millions of refugees, that's not actually a lot. But for that person who's starting again, and it's something that we can offer, which is friendship, which is jokes. We can introduce them. We're largely a Jewish group, so we can introduce them on, to bagels and how you eat your bagels, with cream cheese and smoked salmon. People come from abroad and think that smoked salmon is the weirdest food ever, right? And you can be like, no, this is how, this is what you do, right? Okay, so these kinds of silly sort of welcomes, introductions to what some people in Canada are like. That's the thing that we do. And what's the question? It's really fun. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You should all get to know refugees yourself. Yeah, sure. Good. That's what you should do. You should make new friends, and you should make sure that when you make them, that they're good cooks, because that is the single most important thing that people from outside bring us, which is better food that we can leave behind the poutine, and eat better.
All right, thank you. We're going to open it up for questions and answers soon, but before we do that, so give you time here in the room to formulate your question, online as well, and we will have somebody monitoring the questions, and so we will feed them forward as well. But I want to give you just a chance to anything else you would like to say before we go to question and answers. Anything I didn't ask you that you really would like to be able to share.
I can tell you some jokes.
Sure. How about one?
Why is the math textbook sad?
Oh dear. Why is a math textbook sad?
Yeah, it's full of problems.
It's full of problems indeed. Okay.
That's the only one I know that doesn't involve toilet humor. Sorry.
Okay. Who would like to start with questions? Yes. All right. So the question, both of the speakers have been identified as academics. So can you describe a bit of your training and involvement in the field?
Yeah. So before that, before that, I am a fellow at University of Ottawa. So that's my academic part. Before that, I was a law professor at Kabul University for a decade. And beside that, I was a human rights commissioner at Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. So one part of our mandate was dealing with the refugee and also dealing with the immigrants. That's one part. And plus, we wrote 2 good pieces on the refugee, and I also taught a refugee law for a semester or 2. And beside that, since myself made to flee our country, I'm not sure I can claim that I'm refugee because I wasn't, but the situation that's happening on the different categories. So I do have a lived experience of that. And beside that, since I'm a member of the community and after 2021, I'm actively involved and engaged with the different communities that are working with Afghan refugees in terms of the interpretation, integration, and also other things that I can offer. So that's all from my side.
Excuse me, I'm a professor of applied ethics at the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs, which is on the 6th floor here. My interest has always been, like in my field, I call myself a democratic theorist. My interest has always been in how people can get along, even though they're very, very different. I wrote my PhD thesis was about that question: how do you get along if you're different? And then you know, like, I mean, I assume that you're Canadian, but or on your way to being Canadian. That's what I assume that everybody is who's here. Is then there's a question of how do we become a country of people who are so different, and that obviously the answer to that question is migration. And so then I I mean, academic careers are long and you can't get fired. So I needed a new topic, so I moved to immigration policy. Refugee policy was of interest of mine because of my personal background. So I've been working on that. I wrote a lot of stuff. I could tell you more, but you don't want to know. I could send you my CV.
All right. Excellent. Any other questions? One online. Okay. How do you expect your work? Whoops, it just disappeared. Could you put that one back on again? Okay, maybe then we'll get Val B to verbalize.
Okay, I was just going to say that I spent most of my career working with refugees and settlement. I've done lots of private sponsorship, but my career I was working as an ESL instructor, and I taught ESL literacy, so people who have had limited schooling. I'm retired, but in the last year and a half, our federal government has drastically reduced the funding for LINK programs, and LINK programs provided language classes as well as settlement. And the classes are now reduced to only the very lowest levels. And I think this is having sort of showing what Canada's welcome is. It's not quite as welcoming as it was because the classes provided a lot of the things you guys have been talking about, friendships, meeting other people, settlement, how to find a job, and these kind of things. So I'm dismayed by it, and I wondered if anybody could address anything about that, or it just makes me think that it looks like our federal government, and that reflects what people are saying, aren't as welcoming to refugees as they have been for the last 20 years. So that I just wanted to.
Okay, any comments on that?
Yes, boo. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I agree with that. And I guess my comment is basically that not to be too partisan about it, it seems to me that what the government is trying to do is cut things that no one will notice so that by the time anybody notices that this happens, it's somebody else's problem. Right. So that seems to me the strategy. So, I mean, it'll take a bit for people to realize that the LINK program is such an essential part of people's integration life. And so, that raises the question of what should we do? And I suspect, given how you described yourself, that you know the answer to that better than I do. I just yell and get frustrated. But I don't have a channel by which to direct that currently. You should tell me.
I don't know either, other than writing to government and trying to vote this way and educate people. A lot of people don't understand differences between visa holders and refugees and PRs and immigrants and all these things that sometimes is just getting even to be able to talk about with people that aren't familiar with it is the way I try to help it and talk about settlement as an important piece. So anyway, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Another online, Ian? You're muted yet?
No, I don't even know how to use Zoom, I guess. Thank you so much. It's really nice to hear about the book, Patty. Good to see you, Shabnam. It's really interesting what you have mentioned. I'm wondering, kind of from like a global justice perspective, in the book chapter, you talk about how like the responsibility of different countries and how that is shared. And you're focusing a lot on immigrant admission, right? Like, so how many refugees should these countries accept? And as you mentioned, that's quite expensive because it involves healthcare and social services. Another approach is just providing humanitarian funding to neighboring countries, or kind of an initial humanitarian response. And how do we kind of juggle those two types of commitments, right? Like the Canadian government giving money to international organizations to help Afghan refugees, maybe in Pakistan or in Iran, neighboring countries, versus funding resettlement. And how would you think about that? Thanks a lot for a great book chapter and for the overall project.
Okay, Shabnam is telling me to go first. Ian, thanks for your question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, about a year ago, somebody asked exactly this question, although asked it in an even more forthright way, which was to say, you take the $45,000 it takes to integrate a person, just to begin the process of integrating somebody into Canada in a comfortable way, and send that abroad to any refugee space, hosting space, and it will do so much more to support people, to give them food and so on. And so what is the justification for spending this much money on people here when our money would go so much farther abroad? Okay, so I don't have an answer to that question. What I would just say is that if we were going to be responsible about it, which we're not, but put me in charge of the world, then what I think you have to do is sort of look at all the different kinds of things that refugees need abroad and try to divide up according to which of the tasks states can do best and are most willing to do, right? So those are two different kinds of things philosophically. And do best. I mean, I don't know if I'm in a room full of Canada critics or not. Sometimes I come into these rooms and everybody is like, everything Canada does is bad. You think, well, actually, I mean, it's all comparative, isn't it? So, okay, so what do we do well? The answer to that question, notwithstanding Val's comment, is typically we integrate people well. I mean, and for people who hate the word integrate, I just want to put a footnote there and say, Leonard is very critical of the term integration, which has deeply moral and normative consequences for people who are subjected to integration, and she knows that. Okay, so good. Okay, so so the Canada does that well, and so I think that the answer to the question, why should Canada bring people here and integrate them, is because we do it well. But other countries can do other things well, and I think it's really important not to say. I mean, Hungary is in a funny place. That's my origin country. Okay, so it's a funny place, got a new guy in charge. Maybe it's a less bad country than it was, 3 months ago. And what can they offer, right? And there's some movement to suggest that the Magyar will actually do something for refugees. But obviously, you can't change a highly racist population overnight. So the answer is not going to be send a gazillion different appearing refugees to Hungary. The answer might be exactly as you say, Ian, allow Hungary to send money abroad and stop berating them for being racist while Magyar works to change the Hungarian attitude, right? So I think, if you're going to talk about like burden sharing or responsibility sharing, then you need to be honest about what countries can do and what they're offering and how it should be evaluated. And, some mathy kind of algorithm person can, you need one of those guys. Maybe it's something like Google Gemini now, to sort of divide it up and assign jobs, right? And we'll take some and other countries will take other ones that they're best suited for.
Okay. Shabnam? There it's turned on, yeah.
So as I mentioned, when we are speaking about the responsibilities, there are two kinds of responsibility. What is the globally shared responsibility? That's every country who's under the convention, they have. One is the specific responsibility that the countries that were part of the war on the terrorism, that's a different kind. So when we are speaking about the people, first, they are not safe in Afghanistan, they are not safe in the neighboring country. Plus, the second thing is that we have a generation of refugees in the neighboring countries. For example, we have refugees in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in Iran. They are living for almost 5 decades there. Still, they don't have any document that recognize their human being or somehow a humanhood or something. They are not allowed to go to school in Iran specifically. They are not allowed to go to the university. They are not allowed to go to the public hospitals. Everything, they should have money. At the same time, they are not allowed to work. They should have money to go to the private hospitals. So if you are speaking about the third world countries, I'm not sure, this is some same kind of word, or not, maybe global south or something, our part of it, the responsibilities, the political relationship between countries, it's very different. So if you're providing the helps to the third countries, like Iran or Pakistan, I'm speaking of one case, that's not going to help them. How long you can, somehow it's like you're just making them like used to humanitarian aid. And specifically, if I'm speaking about Pakistan misused the international aids for Afghan refugees, and they built even some scholars claim that they built on their nuclear system based on this money, and they are using it as a bargaining chip, and that's with most of the Afghanistan neighboring country. So that's not Afghanistan case. Maybe that's Ukraine case also, because first the Poland, Finland, they will come out. Now they have a problem. So that's the problem with that. And that, if you are speaking about the Canada, I think we are only speaking on the one side. We never speak about how much the immigrants or refugees contribute to the economy of the Canada. I had a report from the USA at the first year, 2022, almost $3 billion Afghan refugees contributed to the US economy. I myself, I never receive a cent from the government. I was in a hotel and I found a job. I think there is 100 of people that they have experience with the Western organization. So if you're speaking about the burden on government, another side, we should speak how much they contribute on the economy, how much they contribute to the culture, how much they contribute to the society. So I think if we are going to analysis, we should also see if our approach is just enough. We put people in dangers, and now we are just giving them some money to the international organization that's more than 70% of them they spend on their own bureaucracy. And only 10% is going to the people, and then that 10% is also misused by the neighboring country, and they are not. And nowadays, if you are hearing the news, the Pakistan is forcefully deporting Afghans, even who has the immigrants who has a kind of a UNHCR registration, or they have a cases here. So I think if you're speaking about refugee, I think we should see some fair system that in my point of view, I know the economy is very important, but if we are speaking about the human rights and refugee, I think we should see all factors that's involved.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. And you've got a question as well. So we're very delighted. This is the first and only book event that we actually have the editor of the volume here, Emilio Rodriguez, with us. So very honored to have you in our presence. And you've got a question.
Yes, thanks, Willard. And it's very nice to meet you, Dr. Leonard and Shabnam. I know we've collaborated a lot online, but these days you can collaborate with someone for years and not see them in person, which is it's quite awful. So I'm glad that we get the chance now. I had a question that was very similar to Val's question, but if I may, I would like to provide a response in a way and see what you think around that. I think Val's question was asking, how do we bring this discussion into the reality right now, in a reality that is different even than at the time in which we worked on this book, right? I would say that there are two things that I take away from the effort that we collectively did. The first is that we were trying to seek evidence and pursue truth in a way, and highlight some of the things that among policy circles in advocacy in human rights organizations were already clear that we were discussing. And we wanted to bring those facts and that information into a broader audience, right? Not only speak to an echo chamber, but also expand it. And I think that's really important, right? Because then you have actual information around refugee resettlement. What is Canada actually doing in terms of these responses? How does it look like in terms of our response to asylum seekers in the US-Canada border? How are we treating migrant workers? Those are things that sometimes in the superficial news cycle are, misrepresented. There's a lot of disinformation. So I think it is really important that we have volumes like this that are trying to collect that and put some of that perspective in a broader forum. And the second thing, which I think is really important, is to focus on values. I remember, and I'll give a very brief anecdote. I remember I was in a policy discussion in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, and the topic was economic development. And there was a panel discussion, and we had this economist coming and talking about what are the best methods to achieve economic development in specific countries. And there was this one scholar, Elizabeth, who kept asking the same question. What is wealth for? She asked him, okay, I understand that you want to increase wealth, but what are you using it for? What is the purpose of this? And she brought it into a completely different philosophical dimension to ask about the purpose of our society. What are we working towards? Why are we doing this? I think the book is trying to do something similar to that, because we're asking not how is immigration beneficial to Canada, which is an important question, not from an economic perspective, you know, what's happening in the country around this. We're asking, how does human rights immigration policy look like? I think civil society can ask that question. I don't think many spaces are asking that question. And I think it's part of our responsibility to continue asking that and finding solutions. So again, I don't know what the solution is right now to the political situation or to prioritizing this in a broader sense, but I do think that we need to continue trying to find evidence, and we need to continue trying to center the conversation around values as well, which is what we can do.
Okay. Okay. It's super nice to meet you. Okay, but I think here's what I think you should do, your next project, or here's what I think you should do. I've got an idea. You should run a series of blog posts written by people like Val, who can see the early warning signs of the changes that are being made, right? Like can you imagine, like, so maybe Val, I think Val described themselves as retired. So then maybe they have time, maybe they don't. That's the busiest time of your life. But right. So it reminds me of were other people parts of this when the Syrians, when thousands of Syrians started to arrive in Canada, one of the things Okay. All of the sponsor groups that welcomed them were all made out of largely white women who were approximately 65. So people who had just retired from the civil service at the peak of their powers and were bored. Okay. And what they did, so they formed groups, largely, overwhelmingly, this is what the research showed, about who was doing this work. And then they became incensed because this is a population of people who did not know in Ottawa that taking the bus is so expensive. And so they would be telling, new arrivals, listen, you should take the bus. You don't need to buy a car. And then would be like, and then people trying to get on the bus would be like, are you out of your mind? It's so expensive to take the bus. We're 5 people. We're taking an Uber. Okay. So the lesson there was that that the set of people who were quite motivated to do the work actually didn't understand the sort of the on the ground experience of living with less than a civil servant's wealth. And that population of women launched a campaign in Ottawa to have privately sponsored refugees be given free bus passes for 6 months because and they were successful in this, right? And it's a kind of example, right, of largely women, highly educated, very astute observers of the human condition, using their power for the right kind of thing, right? Making people who run OC Transpo feel full of shame, which they should. You can put online, which they should. I say this as somebody who had to send her kid to school in an Uber this morning so she could get there on time. Okay, so these kinds of stories, right, which certain people in certain positions of privilege can emphasize and get traction on, is probably something that we should take advantage of, that Val can take advantage of, in the same way that this sort of cluster of women who managed to get the bus pass could do. So I know you've moved on to a different job, but like I feel like somebody should collect these stories, because Val's not the only one with a story like this. There are other stories of how services, very basic services on the ground, are hugely important to protecting the values that Canada claims to value.
Any comments from you, Shabnam?
I'm not sure if I'm in a good position to speak about, because I'm not that much involved in this side of the governance, that how you can work on the policies. But I think I'm just a small story of my mom. She's taking the English language class, and she's in the 6th level. And a month ago, she came to me and told that, do you know that the government is stopping sponsoring the English language classes in our school? And I told, why? And she told, I don't know, but it was a good opportunity for me to learn English and to socialize, but now they don't know. I don't know why they are stopping, and everyone is concerned. And she was asking, I wish I took a level in 2 semesters, and by then I will be in the 4th, so I will have a year to continue my English language, because that's very important. So that's the kind of the success story that some programs has. But what can we do? I think we as a activist and also as academic, if we have this kind of project that work with the lived experience of and sharing small stories from the like I shared, or some of the young story shared. I think if we work on that and do advocacy as kind of advocacy that's kind of joint advocacy on the shared value, I think that will have some kind of result at least. But still, I'm not sure if I'm in a good position to talk about it.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll have, I know we've got lots online as well, but we are running out of time. So we've got one final question here. Maybe, Rena, if you want to put your email address in the chat, and if some of these questions could be forwarded to Rena, maybe we can have some follow-up if that would be good.
Thank you. So my name is Radimus. I think Patty knows me. I just want to say thank you. And I just want to quickly say a story about me and Emilio. We did the Holocaust education program years ago. This is where we met. And I think we learned, one of the things that we learned from learning about the Holocaust is it's very easy to sell hate, but it's very hard to sell love. So I'm happy to see, thank you for the book that is documenting a lot of people doing love work. So thank you. So Patty, I just want to go back to your comment on, because yes, the Syrian refugees, I think we're privileged and lucky to have this group of people who had money to bring them. I'm part of the ROC, the St. Joe's, and I saw, the people were coming, putting on us money, support, and, and then the Ukrainian crisis and the war. So also people, were exhausted and the resources were exhausted, but still people were interested in bringing Ukrainian refugees, and they are refugees, despite they're white. And then when the genocide happened in Palestine, in Gaza, and in Sudan, because Sudan also had a genocide that's much worse than Gaza, but anyway, people were so hesitant to help. And also, and even the women and feminist groups who were advocating to bring women, from Syria and from Ukraine, they were silent, to bring women from Gaza, most of them, and from Gaza and Sudan. And because they don't have resources anymore. People are exhausted financially. There is an inflation. So it is back in 2015, it was much easier to go and collect money. Now it's very, very hard. So the question is, and we're hearing about funding cuts, government cuts, and even government employees who used to sponsor these people are laid off. So who and how should we should motivate people to continue doing the work of love, bringing refugees and helping them integrate. And I do agree with you, I love integration. And I'm an immigrant myself, and I think I'm very well integrated in this country that I love. So who and how can we still continue doing this love with all the objective circumstances that's happening? Thank you.
Two separate questions there, right? What's going on in Sudan and Palestine that did not cause the Canadian government and the population to rise up in favor of supporting refugees? And then the second question, which is how do you motivate people to do this work? So just I'm quite interested in the question of moral motivation. And I don't have any good answers to this question. The Israel-Palestine thing is a complete disaster, and everybody's forgotten about Sudan. Nobody cares about Sudan. So that's where we are. So how do you motivate people? I mean, you have I don't know. I actually don't know. So I could say silly things. Here's what I guess. What I think is you should go door to door and ask, because actually the set of people who are willing to do that work for Syrians are largely still around. And I think the difference now is a political environment that is not encouraging this work, right? I mean, you can't forget that the Syrians were also a different color. They were also a different religion. But for reasons, we had an election at that time that was fought on the issue of Syrians. Why that sort of became the cause célèbre for the Trudeau government. I mean, somebody's probably writing a PhD thesis about that right now. In fact, probably everybody is. So we'll know in 5 years why that sort of captured the attention of the Trudeau government. But we just don't have leadership that is directing us in that way, right? I mean, there was a real symbiosis between Trudeau and the civil servants who rose up to support Syrians, and I don't think the set of people who rose to help are gone. What I think is gone is the leadership. So I don't know, like tell Mark Carney to go find some Sudanese or some Palestinians and take some pictures and post them as selfies on his Instagram account. Does he even have Instagram? Does he know what Instagram is? I don't even know, right? And like that's like honestly, that's what we need. He's so popular right now. People think he's like his suits are nice and whatever, right? So like if he like a few selfies would go a long way, but you need him to. You think I'm being flippant, but like I'm literally not. I mean, the Trudeau and his selfies with hijabi women was probably the single most influential thing that happened at that time. But he was not scared of them. He went into you remember this? He got elected and then he went right into the subway system in Montreal and found every hijabi woman he could and took pictures with them and posted them online. And then Canadians were like, oh, they're not actually scary because there's our really hot prime minister posing in selfies with them, right? Okay, so send a letter to Mark Carney and say, where's the selfies with the Sudanese, with the Palestinians? No, I know, but like for real, like Rado's question is, how do you motivate people? And I think the people who are willing to do this work don't go away. They don't go away. People don't stop. They don't love Syrians more than Palestinians more than Sudanese. I don't think the people who do this work are the problem. I think the problem is that there's a leadership that is not leading.
All right. Well, thank you. And thanks for all the engagement online. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions or comments, but that's a good thing to end on. People that care about this don't go away. That's good to know. And let's make sure that's always a reality. We don't go away. We stay engaged, we stay informed, and let's keep this work going. Thank you all. Thank you to the speakers. I know you're going to want to express your gratitude to them. And thank you online. And you have an opportunity to purchase a book tonight. And just like a high school yearbook, you can run around and get different people to sign. You got a couple authors and the editor here. So take advantage of that. And we also want to let you know of a special matching grant to keep this work going. And it's really a follow-up on the book, A Renewed Canadian Welcome. And the initiative with the $20,000 matching grant is called Building the Canadian Welcome. So talk to Scott here if you would like to participate in that and be a part of the $20,000 matching grant. And maybe Rena can put something into the chat as well to direct people. But thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening, and thank you online. This was a very rich conversation, and this is a very important initiative. So thanks for your support. And for those would like to stay around, the annual general meeting for Citizens for Public Justice begins at 7:45, and it'll be the same link. So just hang around, and you're welcome to be a part of that. All right. Thank you.